Well, good morning, everybody. It looks like a lot of people besides ARC are stranded in Orlando thanks to the storm. Looking at the size of the attendance today, so that's great. But welcome to the IIoT Convergence session. I'm Craig Resnick, your host. We got 3 speakers and 5 panelists, so I will be very brief in my presentation to get us started and get to some of the great case studies here. So I'm sure you all have seen the drill on the phone, shutting the phone off. Certainly, IIoT convergence is a theme and a story that's been going on for the last several years. Many times people in IT have learned the word real time, and then people in OT realize that why do people in IT don't have equipment that's 25 or 30 years old like we do on the factory floor. But this move towards convergence is certainly essential in every organization. Every organization has certainly made different levels of progress of their conversion. But one of the things that we're seeing is that as the only way that you can properly leverage newer technologies like industrial Internet of Things, being able to take advantage of all this data, big data, cloud, you can't really do that if you're still living in the separate domains. And the problem is you got to deal with the realities that most of these plants still have, certainly on the OT side, a lot of 25 and 30-year-old old DCSs, PLCs that are being supported via eBay to kind of keep them living and breathing for the time being. So one of the things we'll talk about in this session is how companies in the world of IT and OT convergence living in this world where they still have to deal with this legacy products because these companies are not going to be in a complete rip and replace function. So in many cases, this is the familiar ISA 95 model, which even though some people look at this and say it's certainly old-fashioned and behind the times, but this is certainly the reality of what we see in most of the plants that we visit. And, because as we get to this world of taking the OT world and moving into the convergence with the IT world and taking advantage of things like virtualization and cloud and certainly analytics, now you're able to have new positions within the plant, such as data scientists that take advantage of all that data, and even moving some of that analytics down into the engineering teams. But this is also a big part of the IT-OT convergence story. It's interesting because sometimes when we ask OT what they think about IT, and certainly there's a lot of they talk about things like high cost. Is it a commodity? They don't necessarily understand what the return on investment is of some of these IT solutions and what people's role is. But the biggest complaint we usually hear from the OT side is that IT really doesn't understand what real time is and the consequences of an unscheduled downtime as a result of doing some sort of maintenance, patches, or upgrades. So as we go through the process and as we kind of see this conversion of taking that data from the factory floor and moving it up, and then at the same time taking advantage of a lot of that information that's available at the enterprise level, that again, from information that's being stored in the cloud, leveraging a lot of the virtualization technology that goes on to minimize the number of servers and being able to uncouple those servers from hardware and software upgrades and not having to do them simultaneously, being able to cut back on the amount of IT staff as a result of virtualization, and even some energy savings that goes along with that. So, sometimes we also get into the thing with the priorities, and do the priorities differ between the groups? So as these comes together, what do you call it? Do you call it a manufacturing IT group? Is it like an embedding IT skills within the OT group? Are you actually giving automation to IT? And sometimes, we sometimes have seen these firewalls in the past, or sometimes the civil wars between the IT departments and the OT departments. Sometimes there's still some areas of mistrust and sometimes political issues that we find in some of the plants. But ultimately, what we find is they actually have more in common And once they start working together, they find they actually have more in common and common goals and common denominators than they once think. I mean, certainly areas of cybersecurity, which has been a huge theme at this forum, and everybody still has the mantra of the biggest problem in a plant is based on having unscheduled downtime, so that's an issue that they can work together. Everybody has the same type of KPIs and metrics that they're measured against, and ROIs and ROAs that in many cases are being asked to be 12 months or less in some plants. So I think as they begin to work together, they're realizing that they have more in common than they once thought. So we've lived in the world of take some of these old temperature chart recorders that go back to the sometimes before most of us were born. And how do you combine that with a lot of the disruptive technologies that are a result of analytics and big data and cloud, being able to put low-cost sensors onto existing assets and sometimes sending that information directly to the cloud rather than having to add scar weight to an existing control system by adding I/O, especially if that information coming from that asset is not going to be part of making a control decision. So it's all part of the connected story, and the connected story is really what enables IT and OT convergence to succeed. So, it's with IIoT, it's the ability to be able to instrument, even the lowest cost bearing and being able to get information that will give you the predictive information you need to know that bearing is wearing out, scheduling a replacement for that bearing, scheduling a service call to have that bearing replaced, and being able to collect this data very, very frequently. And again, this cannot happen in a world without IT-OT convergence. So, ultimately, you're able to get more and more information out of your assets, get a better return on those assets. And one of the things we'll be talking about in this session is how can you even get data out of old legacy assets? Because again, as I said earlier, these plants are not going to be in a position of being able to rip and replace sometimes 20 and 30-year-old equipment that may be functionally obsolete, but is still working, and even if it is currently being supported based on using sources like eBay for spare parts. But again, this is something that companies are moving, especially in the area as people are retiring and millennials are coming in, and they want to leverage a lot of the tools like using their smartphones and tablets to be able to do more monitoring within the plant. So this is something that really can't happen without IT and OT convergence. So we have three great speakers this morning, Ben Savage from Apex Supply Chain, Craig Leitner from Washington Gas and Light, and Harish Mulkani from Arconic, which is obviously a derivative of what was Alcoa. And then we also have five panelists this morning as well that will back up some of these great speakers. So because we got a full agenda today, I'm going to start right off, and thank you very much. And I think